No, it's cool. I ain't recognize you
Oh, without the what?
without the
Fangs?
beard.
Oh, yeah. Things change.
What in the world?
Things change all the time, you know?
Right, definitely, definitely.
Yeah, you're
Um,
all right.
yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is just like a makeshift podcast. So, just gonna ask you a couple questions. I'm not gonna keep it too long. Probably
Oh,
like
no problem. Take your time. It's good to catch up, man. I haven't
right,
talked to you really or seen you in longer.
right. I want to go back to probably around 2014, 2015. A lot of people have been reaching out to me. It was like, you got to meet this guy named David. He's an
Mm.
architect, designer, doing some designing the spaces. He's doing a lot of social work with the youth. And we sat down at Starbucks. And
Yeah.
so remember that?
Yeah. It's crazy. Think back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think something else I saw you doing around the same time. I know you was doing some stuff at Kent State at the time, and I seen you doing some stuff in Cuba.
Yeah. Yeah. That's through Kent State. Yeah.
So let's just introduce yourself a little bit and talk about kind of start at that point. Like, what was you doing at that point?
Okay. Uh, well, my name's David Jurca, and now I run a design company called Seventh Hill. Focuses on urban design, which is like architecture, but more at the neighborhood scale. And I've been um, working at starting this company for almost 2 years now, so it's still pretty new. But before that, I worked at Kent State University and was the associate director at a community design center that's part of the university called the Cleveland Urban Design Center.
Okay.
And that is kind of basically like a nonprofit that works with communities throughout Northeast Ohio to help design better places. So that can mean public spaces like parks. It can mean, creating bike paths through neighborhoods that connect parks. It can mean new buildings and libraries and places that are more attractive in all kinds of ways. So it's kind of broad. It's like there's a lot that kind of fits under that umbrella of urban design, right? So I was there for I think 12 years, like 11 or 12 years. It's crazy to think, like we were saying, how time flies. It's amazing
Right.
when you're busy and you feel like you're doing something important, time really flies. But so in addition to doing work for clients while I was there, a lot of cities would hire us to help lead master plans. In addition to that, I also taught in the graduate program. So Kent State has an architecture program. It's in the College of Architecture and Environmental Design. And the graduate program was actually in Cleveland. It was focused in urban design and located in Playhouse Square. So that's where our office was. So I didn't actually go down to Kent too much, maybe like once a month on average. So most of my time was downtown teaching graduate studios, community design charrette classes, teaching independent thesis projects for grad students that kind of looked at all kinds of issues. And that's how I got connected to the projects in Cuba, which was through an urban design studio. The Cleveland Foundation has this program every year that connects Cleveland-based art and design organizations and groups, and sometimes in performing arts, connecting them to performers, artists, and designers in other countries. And there's this kind of partnership that's built. So in that first year that you're referring to, Cuba was the country that was selected. And our work at Kent State, which focused on urban design, that we were one of the partners, and we got to pick our partners in Cuba, which was really exciting because we found this couple, these two architects that work to redesign and establish this arts center in Havana called Fábrica de Arte Cubano. So it's like this old factory that now produces artwork of all kinds, you know, and it's open to the public. At night, it's like a club, so they get revenue from that club at night, and people waiting in long lines to get in. And they use that money to pay for arts programming, to support photographers, to support artists, to support, you know, community lessons to kids in the neighborhood, which I think is like a super smart model.
Yeah.
And anyway, we partnered with those architects to create a master plan for the neighborhood surrounding them. So I went down there with my students, spoke to residents, and then that was actually 2 years of that. 1 year was, so anyway, it was like 2 years that led to 2 years of working in Cuba, and created a report for it. So all kinds of interesting opportunities that come up, you know, while we're working there, for sure.
Right. Awesome. Get into making your own spaces. Was you doing that at the same time?
Yeah. So we were talking about making our own spaces. That's a program that was started at Kent State University, and it's still a program of Kent State University. And the idea there is, if anybody's interested, you can find out more at wearemoos.org. So it's like We Are Moose, or Making Our Own Space. The idea there was, it actually started, you know, as I said, we did master planning work and design work for communities. And when you do those kind of master plans, when you are trying to get input from a wide range of people in a neighborhood, you have things like public meetings, or you have online surveys, or you have focus groups, all kinds of ways that you try to hear from the different groups of people that might be affected by that project, right? So like, this isn't just one building that a property owner has, right? It's many buildings, like blocks, parks, and you know, the way the streets work and the sidewalks work, right? So when you have these public meetings, your intention might be to get everyone there, but the reality is, and you've been to some of these public meetings,
right,
it's often the same people that go to every public meeting, and almost never do you see high school students or middle school students there, right? So in order to try to address that problem, we wanted to get creative. So we thought, well, let's focus a project on that age group of middle and high school students, and let's work with them directly to not just like rethink and redesign, but actually rebuild parts of their environment, like their public spaces, right? So the idea sounds good, but things can just remain as an idea if you don't have a partner that can make it happen, right? So fortunately, we had someone like Nelson Beckford from the St. Luke's Foundation at the time, who saw that vision and understood it. And then the St. Luke's Foundation funded this first year of a project that we ended up calling Making Our Own Space, where we worked with about 12 students that lived in the Buckeye neighborhood, and went to school in the Buckeye neighborhood. And after school, we had sessions with them where we went through a process of talking to them about what a public space is. But beyond talking, we actually went out across the street into this open space called Britt Oval that didn't really have much going on. It was just kind of like mowed lawn and a couple of trees, but not many people used it. And we opened that space up to them to tell us what they want to do there. What would they find interesting? What would bring them here over and over again, right? And in order to imagine and then test out their ideas, we trained them to use power tools, you know, so, you know, chop saws, circular saws, you know, hammers, everything. And then they built their own prototypes for public space improvements on that site. And then little by little, you know this as a designer, you know, that iterative process, that idea that you make something, you put it out in the world, you test it, you tweak it, you remake it, you keep reworking on it until it gets better and better.
Right.
It doesn't come out of your mind perfect, almost never, right? Like you got to start making to kind of, feed it along its path
Yeah.
of growing and becoming what it's going to be, So anyway, so that was something we thought would be, a 1-year project. We got a grant. This is great. It turned out, it was fun. The kids loved it. Funders loved it. So we thought it was a 1-year thing, but it turns out now it's in its, oh man, I don't know, maybe 6th year or something. It's in 6 different neighborhoods at this point. So after that first year, Kamala Lewis from the city of Shaker Heights read an article about this project and asked, hey, could we do it in Shaker? And then again, when I was at Kent State, we talked about that possibility and then made that happen. And then that just kind of kept growing, right? And so the first one started where the area that you know very well, right? So through the Boys and Girls Club in Buckeye, at St. Luke's, like I know you do work there, and fortunately we were able to cross paths a couple times.
Right. I mean, I played on some of the stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of still in love with it. I kind of want some in my backyard. Like, can you talk about some of the things that they did, like slides and?
Yeah. So, let's see. We had.
I'm sorry. So after you collected some data from them, and you kind of got an idea what they wanted from it. Did you guys kind of sketch up like, okay, we'll have something they can jump off of. Here's something they can climb. Things like that.
Yeah. So this is where, like, I was just thinking about how to bring this in because, like yourself, you contributed to the project, and a big, a central part of making our own space is to bring in people from other disciplines and from different design backgrounds to interact with the students. So one of the goals is to expose these students that are often from communities of color to other designers of color who they don't often interact with, right? So from the beginning, one of the people that we got a lot of inspiration from in terms of what this program can be is someone that I met in Philadelphia at a conference a long time ago, and his name's Alex Gillum, and he started a program called, well, he's got a couple of them now, but one is Public Workshop, and Public Workshop does a lot of work with youth and hands-on building, training them how to use these skills for the goal of making their own environments, right? And he has another part called WPA, a Tiny WPA, which is a nonprofit arm. But that's to say, we brought in Alex right from the start to work with us and the students, and I learned a lot from him. And one of the things that he does, which I found really important and try to keep it, is the idea that you build first, then work on designing or drawing or refining, right? So often the model is, all right, let's get in the classroom, let's get out the piece of paper, get a pencil, let's draw your ideas, let's brainstorm words, let's draw concepts, and then the last part down the line is, okay, now let's get out the material and start building, right? But his paradigm, like his mindset here is, let's start with those objects, let's start with the materials, and then let's refine over time. And then maybe we get the paper out to kind of figure out exactly, well, how are you going to get this joint to work in the most slick way possible? And I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah. Well, you're starting with the end result.
Yeah, you're starting with the material, and there's kind of like magical things that happen with that. So the students tend to be more engaged, more involved. They're more they're moving physically, so that kind of does things for your body, which are good. You're lifting things that are kind of heavy. It's more spatially engaged. And as you know, different students and people in general, this isn't just about young people, but all of us, we have different ways of learning, so some people learn and feel more confident in a more physical setting. They have better body awareness and they're engaged that way in order for them to stay focused, right? Right. Some people, want to be verbal and they want to talk and communicate. Some people want to be more quiet and focused, right? So there's something special about this kind of building, making with your hands, being involved and engaged that kind of hits a little bit of of everyone's learning style. And it's also keeps some students from feeling like this isn't for me, because building with these materials and these tools is new for almost all of the kids. Like there's not many middle school students that we've encountered that have used a chop saw a lot before.
Right.
You know, maybe they've used a hammer, maybe they used something, but many of them feel like this is new to me. But when you talk about drawing in middle school or high school, like half the class will immediately say, well, I'm not a drawer. You do the drawing. I don't do. They've already like put it in their minds that I can't do that. And that makes them feel like detached, right? So there's, again, something special about introducing everyone in the group to something that's new and unexpected. So no one has that expectation that I'm going to be good at this. It's okay if you mess up, because have you used zip ties to connect pieces of wood before? Probably not. Like, that's okay. Like, you're going to learn just like everyone else, right?
Yeah. Speed me up some. So you made some different transitions and you started Seventh Hill. Talk about that transition, like your mindset, like, you know, you did this for 12 years. You still got your hands in different pots. You're doing a lot of stuff. Kind of talk about that.
Yeah. So one thing, let's see, certainly one of the benefits of working at Kent State and then being in Cleveland for that long and working on these kind of urban design projects is that I get to meet a lot of people like yourself, like people that work for the city and planning department, other architecture firms, other designers, graphic designers. So I've been fortunate to be able to, you know, have this network of people that I really look up to. I love to partner with them. And since starting Seventh Hill, for one, I still get to partner with where I used to work at Kent State. So like, you know, for the example of making our own space, that's still a Kent State program. They still lead it, but I get hired to collaborate with them on that work, you know. So that's great that can still keep that contact and engagement. But one of the main a couple of the main differences now is that the geographic focus at Kent State, at that work at the Urban Design Center, was Northeast Ohio, right? So it was focused on Northeast Ohio because that's where Kent State campuses are located. Sometimes we would get requests from other cities to work on projects over there, but you know, we really found it difficult to justify those projects in other cities since our mission was kind of tied to Northeast Ohio. But now I have more opportunities to do work in other cities if it aligns with the skill sets that I have and the kind of goals that I have for my work. So that's one difference. Like is it's just more broad geographically. I can do projects in Chicago and in other areas nearby. I'm not too eager to do a lot of work that requires travel, well, especially now.
Right.
No one's doing that anyway, so it's kind of a good thing that it's not like all the business is focused on other cities. But you know, but even in the long term, I'm not really interested in spending a significant amount of my time traveling. But I do like the opportunity to explore issues in other cities, you know, that are along the lines of stuff that I do now. Other areas that are different is some projects that don't fall in like that category of urban design so neatly. I like to play on the edges a little bit more. And
what you mean?
Yeah, so sometimes it means using technologies or tools that are newer, emerging, and testing them out. And it might not be what you would consider an urban design project. It might be for like a larger corporate client that is about designing their space for user experiences. So it's not like a neighborhood urban design project, but it uses the skills that I have as a designer and like an architectural background to think through what a user in this space will feel and want, and then design for that.
So you kind of, I've seen you playing around with some augmented reality stuff. So
yeah, that's one of the tools for sure.
Okay, one of the tools. You're talking about AI too, possibly too, getting into that?
Yeah, I don't frankly use, well, I think all of us use AI in ways that we don't even know, but not specifically, like Google, like Gmail uses it. I mean, a lot of stuff use it, but I haven't specifically focused in AI myself yet. I think that's definitely an area that will grow some more over time, but some of the tools you're talking about, like, augmented reality, developing.
Yeah, so machine learning, basically.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, definitely for kind of taking data on an urban environment and using that data to make better decisions about designing places. Yeah. I was actually on a research project when I was at Kent State right before I left that was focused on using big data and like AI as part of the machine learning to kind of process big data, and creating a platform at public libraries so that small businesses could access that data to make better decisions for their business in the future, and also to use it as a tool for public engagement, so that you can get better information and deeper insights on what's the kind of mood or sentiment in an area before and after a development project. For example, you can get better data on like movement patterns. So a lot of transportation or mobility data, like everybody's got a phone in their car now, and then you can use that information to track like where people are actually going, not just like where they say they're going from a survey.
Right.
So that's huge. Yeah, that's huge. And so I was working on some of that towards the end at Kent State, but right now I don't have like a project that's specifically focused on it, but I think it will grow.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Like last time I saw you, you had an initiative that you was doing through Seventh Hill in the Buckeye area. You had a couple meetings doing a lot of data about different spaces and building up that community. And can you talk about talk about that?
Yeah. So I think you're talking about Elevate the East.
Yeah.
That's the name of that project. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's again, if people are interested, I think it's elevatetheeast.org. And that is a public
links. I'm gonna put links below on everything. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it helps. Like this kind of design stuff. It's easier to show than tell. So I can describe it in words. But if others are interested, they can check it out and look on the website. It's easier to explain. But basically, it's a public art planning project that I led with a team of people, including Agnes Studio, their graphic design and communications firm here in Cleveland. Arlene Watson, you probably know her.
Yeah.
She's also a graphic designer now. She's in Georgia.
Right.
Yeah, Ben Herring, another architectural designer. Beth Conway from French Lamb Design Studio. So we worked together on a public art plan, and then the client was Burton Bell Carr Development Corporation. So you're familiar with that CDC. They work in the Buckeye area, Kinsman, and then kind of like spreading out along Kinsman. Woodland Hills is part of it. So it was a long process of working with a steering committee of people that represent community businesses and residents. And we had public meetings, online survey, focus groups, sessions at the rec center. We were at almost every event that happened for like multiple months in the area, asking people for their priorities for public art. If you look at maps of Cleveland that show where, for example, public art sculptures are located, there's a concentration of them in downtown and in University Circle. But this part of the Elevate the East project area through Kinsman, Buckeye, Woodland Hills, a little bit of Union Miles, there's very few, of these public art projects.
Can you explain just like what public art project? Just give me one example.
What is it? Yeah, so public art is basically any art that's available to everyone to like see or touch, right? So this means an example that's more common in Cleveland right now are murals, right? So like painted murals on the side of buildings, particularly on the west side. There's a couple projects, some funded by the Cleveland Foundation, that popped up, a bunch of them overnight almost. They're bright, sometimes brightly colored, like geometric patterns. Sometimes they're more photorealistic. Like I know you had Donald Black. You were interviewing him recently, right? So he's done a few murals on the east side that are large scale images that use the black and white photographs that he's taken, right? So you can imagine his work as an artist could be a photograph that's put on a wall inside of a building. Maybe it's a public building, and then it would probably be more public art, right? Because if everybody can go inside, let's say the courthouse or inside City Hall or a library, it's a public space. That artist could also put it and sell it to a private company or a private individual, and they have it in their living room. But he's making them large scale and putting them on a building where anybody driving down the street or riding their bike or walking down the sidewalk can see it and enjoy it, right? So now that's public art, right? That's for everyone to see. So you could have 2D graphics like murals. You could have sculptures like objects, the various kinds that are out for anyone. If you're from Cleveland, you've probably noticed like these big flowers on Euclid by the Ronald McDonald House, so that's kind of like public art, which is visible for everyone, even though it's like on a private property. If you've been to the Natural History Museum, they have like dinosaurs that you can climb.
Right,
so public art could be sculptures that you interact with and climb on. But you can also have things that have like a real function, like a bike rack. Like in Larchmere, they have bike racks that look like the back of seats, like chairs, right? They're really designed by an artist to be memorable, to give a sense of character, something different and unique about a place. So it makes different places feel different than other places, not all the same, right? So public art can play a really important role in creating an identity, a sense of place, and making people feel like they want to return to a certain location.
So speed me up to now. I mean, now we're in the pandemic. How has this changed?
It changed my work. Well, I'll say my dogs are happier to have my wife at home. That's probably the main difference for them. They always see me because I mostly work from home. With the company, as a designer, I think you get this too. It's actually, I find it great that through the technology we have, through our laptops or desktops and the software programs that are pretty good at exchanging information digitally, it allows us to be more flexible and to work from home. I can still collaborate with partners and they're working from home or from their office. We exchange files. We do video conferencing already. Like that's a lot of how I worked before coronavirus. I have my home office. You see here, this is most of my time is in here working on my desktop or laptop. Now, for sure, there are less meetings outside, so either at other design partners' offices, or I love using the public library, like the South Branch Public Library. They have these great meeting rooms. So I'd schedule those spaces for meetings with some of my project partners. I'm not going there now, obviously. So a lot of those meetings are all going to virtual settings. But as far as some of the workflow, for me, I'm fortunate in that it hasn't changed that much. But for some of the projects that I am working on right now, we had to update and change that public engagement strategy. So like going forward, how are we going to reach people? Like, how are we going to get feedback? Are we just going to postpone everything and wait until, we can go back to the meetings as usual, or do we have to do something different now? And for one project in particular, I'll tell you about, we decided to do a little bit of both. So on one hand, for the public engagement strategy, we are pushing the schedule back a little bit by a couple months so that we can do some engagement actions with groups of like maybe 10 people rather than completely virtually. But we've also changed some of those actions so that they can be done more virtually, right? So one project that I was talking about in particular is I'm partnered with a really large design firm called Stantec on a plan for West 25th Street corridor. From Detroit Avenue, again, if you're in Cleveland, you kind of know this area, West 25th Street from Detroit Avenue all the way to the zoo. It's a long stretch, and it's a project for RTA looking at what the bus stations will look like along that corridor and how we can practically develop along that corridor to support public transit, right? So that's the scope. It's a lot involved in that, from the tiny scale of how does this bus shelter fit in this concrete pad? Does the width of the sidewalk need to extend by a foot or two to make it work better? Should there be bike racks in there? What's the visual identity of this bus stop? Is there a consistent identity at all these dozens of stops along that corridor? Do they change in La Via Hispana a little bit to reflect that culture? And then down by the zoo, it takes on that culture. In Ohio City, it's different. So there's that component, but there's also, what is the community's vision for this vacant lot? Should this building be 5 stories or 10 stories? What's the density that we want in certain locations? Because as we know, if you have more people around a bus stop, it's more likely that that bus stop will be used and the trans will be used, right? So there's those kind of issues. But again, the question is, how do we get feedback from people in these times? So I've been working on updating that plan. In a first step, the engagement plan. So the first step in it is to just understand the data better around who's living here and who's working here. So I spent a lot of time pulling census data based on each census tract along this corridor. It's about a dozen different census tracts, and looked at things like, well, what's the demographic here? Like what percentage African-American, white, Latino, what percentage is Spanish speaking? Because we want to make sure that the materials that we put out, whether in person at a bus stop or on social media, appeals to those people and they understand it. So we want to make sure in certain areas we definitely have Spanish text for all the information. I'm also looking at what percentage of these households have broadband internet access. And in some places, I saw it's as close as 90% broadband internet access, which is pretty high. And these are some parts of Ohio City, but then some other areas are closer to 50% or even a little lower. Right. So the result is in those census tracts where the broadband access is lowest, we want to double down on maybe flyering, door knocking, getting word of mouth, getting a phone list of residents in that area, maybe through a block club or the Community Development Corporation, and really hit hard those areas so that we don't end up having all the voices in this plan coming from a few locations that just happen to have better internet access, for example, right? So again, that's like the first step, and that's one way we're definitely more focused on it than usual because of what we're going through with the COVID-19 quarantine. We want to make sure that if we move forward, we don't have even more like disparity between who's engaged in the public process because of some of the restrictions that are in place in terms of public meetings or having focus groups or school being out and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If somebody wanted to get into this type of architecture, I mean, I guess there's different type of fields. So if somebody wanted to get into this space, do they have to go to school? I mean, where do they begin at? If we're talking about somebody young that's interested in doing some type of design like that, can you talk about that some?
Yeah. So it's an interesting question. There's a couple ways to go down it. And one, I'll say, look at the work that Jacinda Walker did. And again, someone that you had interviewed, Jacinda Walker's design journeys research takes a close look at what are the barriers and pathways to different design professions. So I think that's important to keep in mind, particularly for communities of color, like if you're younger or not. There are sometimes challenges there that if you know about them in advance, I think it's to your benefit, right? Like you know what to expect, and you have an overly like optimistic view of how everything might work.
Right.
You know? But so I think that reality is useful. We actually partnered together on a project, Jacinda and I, when I was working at Kent State. So it's another Kent State program called Design Diversity. So this is another URL, designdiversity.org, where people can go and find out specific data on racial diversity in different design professions in Ohio. You know, so what we know is that communities of color are very underrepresented, and we need more people that represent the communities that are being served to be part of this process, to be designers, to be urban designers, to be architects, to even be graphic designers, because these designers are making the world that everyone else is interacting with, you know, that is engaging with, that their perceptions are being constantly, subtly, every day adjusted by these people. And if these people are clueless about the meaning behind certain visual content, that's going to direct the world in a certain way, right? And could be good, could be bad, but you don't have a lot of confidence in that direction if you think that those people making decisions maybe have a blind spot or two, right?
Yeah.
So I'll say that just as first, I think it's a very important path that you're suggesting, you know, for young people to get into design professions, for sure. So with that in mind, what I do, I'll tell you my path was, I was interested in all kinds of stuff in high school. I didn't know exactly what to go into because I liked history. I liked art. I did like art classes at Cleveland Institute of Art from like when I was in middle school. You know, I'd go to those drawing classes. I loved all that stuff. So I knew art was something I was into, but I didn't quite see what the art path would be for me, to just be like a fine artist. I always wanted to combine it with something that felt more like design, you know, like making something. And the way I think of it is like, my dad is a civil engineer, my mom is a nurse. So I saw that sort of like making, building, constructing things that are kind of like concrete and real, combined with that people side, like caring for people and the health of people. And I kind of think that that's where architecture kind of is. You know, it's very sensitive to the human experience. It's not just math. It's not just like abstract science.
Right.
It's very much focused on, okay, it has to work and be built, and its structures matter, and it has to function in some ways to keep the rain out, hopefully. But it also matters what it makes people feel, you know, like it's not just minimal existence and we're making, you know, the cheapest, fastest thing possible, period. But you want things that make people feel like life is worth living, you know, like it inspires people for some reason or another. It's a place that you want to go to again and again. Like when you're not feeling great, there's a spot in the library that I go to feel recharged, or to be inspired, or just to get away. Like all those things are part of architecture, right? So that's the path I went down, architecture in undergrad. So I went to Ohio State University and graduated in architecture there. And I really love that education of architecture, because it teaches you practical, you know, like design skills. You use software, you use technology, you make models, but you also have to communicate and argue with people why this makes sense or it doesn't. You know, it's not just a math problem that you can kind of assess, objectively. There's a lot of argument as part of it. And then in grad school, I went to Kent State and graduated with a master's degree in architecture that focused in urban design. And to be a licensed architect, you do need a professional degree. So that's usually either a 5-year degree, or what more schools have now is a 4-year undergrad plus 2 years of grad school. And then you also have to work for a certain number of years to get your hours in. And usually it's about 3 years of working somewhere to get your hours checked off. Then you take your state exam. So if you look at it, it's like, okay, 4 years plus 2, that's 6, plus 3, that's like 9. And then you got to take your tests. It might be like 10 years for some people to become licensed. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be licensed to work in an architecture firm. Like, I don't have an architecture license. I didn't take that because I don't focus on just building one building. I do focus on neighborhood scale, and I find that more interesting, frankly, than working on an individual building. So you don't need an architectural license to do that work. If you have the license, that means you put a stamp on construction drawings for this building, and that's legit, and that's definitely an important route for a lot of people to take. But for me, that's not really where my passion is. My passion is really in public spaces. It's kind of like, those spaces between the buildings.
Right.
Buildings matter, but it's mostly because they define that space in between where we interact that's not private.
Let's get into a little bit more of, what's next for you. I see you playing around with we kind of talked about it a little bit, the augmented type of stuff. I guess it's like 2 questions. Can you like recommend some stuff? Like, are you still studying and like reading books, and like, where's your attention going and where you get your data from, and I guess on kind of your downtime of researching this stuff outside of your other duties?
Yeah. No, I love that question because I think it's important, and it's important to dedicate time to exploring new ideas, to dedicate time to being surprised, right? Dedicate time to the unexpected. Like, you can't just expect the unexpected to happen, Like,
Right.
I think you want to set aside time to just pick random books to read, and you never know what you might learn from it. So I think that's true. But let me start first with where I want to go, and then what I'm doing now to get there. One is I think about my work as focused on the process and creating the environments that transform places and people. So my objective is not just to create a plan or a drawing that then can be used to build a new building or even group of buildings. I want to keep very closely embedded in the process from the start an objective to transform people for the better. And that means transforming people during my process while we're working together on a design project. I want to keep in mind, what are the ways that the public engagement project, the meetings, the sessions that we have together, how can that make people better when they are done with that project than what they were when they started? So this is very individual, right? It's not the same for everybody. For some people, for example, their goal might be to meet more neighbors. Okay, let's do that. Let's find ways that I can help create engagement experiences that enable you to meet more of your neighbors.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Let's kind of talk about, I don't want to cut you off too much. Let's talk about, you kind of talking about the psychology of what people want. Now that's not architecture, that's something else.
Yeah, exactly.
That's another skill set. And I think that's backed up with collecting data too, and knowing what people want. So when you know what people want, then you can get the end user, that I'm almost kind of thinking on like creating a brand or creating a feeling. So it's not just getting a cup of coffee. It's it's smelling the coffee. It's hearing the beans,
Yeah,
turn around and cooking and stuff like that. So can you talk
yeah,
about how you got into that space, or can you talk about that?
yeah. You got it. Yeah, you got it exactly. I mean, you're probably aware of this idea too, but let's start with this. So you talk about a book, like a book on this topic that I find useful and inspiring is a book called The Experience Economy. And it's written by two guys, Joseph Pine and Jim Gilmore. Jim Gilmore is actually in Shaker Heights. He lives here and he teaches at Case now, just as recently as a couple years ago. But the idea of the experience economy is, like you said, services and different economic offerings go through a certain ladder of value. So using coffee, like you said, that's a great example for people to think about this example, like in a concrete example. If you think of coffee, you used to be able to buy, and you still can buy coffee in just like huge bags in an unbranded kind of bag of beans, and that's a commodity. It's just like whatever, coffee beans, roasted coffee beans, and you buy it, and it's pretty cheap actually, right? Now, if you put those coffee beans, it could be the same coffee beans, but they're sold under a brand like Folgers or Starbucks or even a fancier brand. It could be the same beans, but now there's a brand around it in a bag, and you buy that on a shelf at a supermarket. It's more expensive. Now you take the same beans and someone wraps it in a service. Now they brewed and poured that coffee in your cup at a diner. Those beans are even more expensive now, right? Now you wrap that in, like you're saying, the smell, the ambiance, the environment of like a Starbucks, somewhere that's not just a diner, but they've really thought about what's their story, what's the brand identity, the setting, the lighting, the mood, the barista's training. That environment now is an experience that people are willing to pay even more for. That same bean, that same coffee, right? Now it's wrapped in an experience. And this is a level that is broadly called the experience economy, right? So people are, and a lot of folks have heard about this now, especially in the past couple of years, good examples and bad, like maybe Fire Festival is like the most obvious bad example of this.
Right.
So people are willing to pay thousands of dollars to go to some island for an experience. I don't even know what they were planning to take home, but the experience is probably photographs on Instagram, like listening to the music, hearing the sounds, feeling special.
Right.
So
I gotta watch that one again. I gotta watch that one again. That's like one of my
yeah, that's a great example of like a peak experience economy that's just like failed, right? But not all of those experiences need to be failures for that kind of gross as in terms of goal, but you can have experiences that are much more meaningful. Let's say like any kind of like art experience, or if you're creating a music performance, what are you paying for? You're paying to experience that 1 hour of great times and maybe have some memories at the end, right? So that's all good, and there's a lot of examples of that. Now, in the book, they actually argue that there's another level beyond that experience economy, right? And that is, so when people expect to not only have a great experience, but they want to leave that experience transformed. They want to be different when they come out of that experience than they were when they entered it, right? So now, if you think of those examples, think about Nike. Okay, so Nike, let's go through that process again. Nike, you could have shoes that are just like generic, off-brand, whatever commodity shoes, and you can buy a box of some tennis shoes for a cheap price. Now you get those shoes and you put a Nike swoosh on it, they're way more, right? Now you go to the next level and you get a service. So maybe they're Nike's website, Nike ID. You can create your own shoe. So there's something special about that process. Maybe the materials aren't even that different than that off-brand start, but you created it yourself. There's an experience. It's a website. It's a service, right? Now go to the next level, and now you go to the Nike town, right? They have a store. They have an environment you can walk in. Everything kind of exudes that Nike brand and you feel special about it, someone's paying for that store at the end of the day, right? Like it gets embedded in the cost of your shoes, right? So they also have different experiences that Nike puts on that you can pay for, and you can attend some event that's, you know, a Nike event, right? So the next step, transformation, an example of that is Nike Run Club, right? So Nike Run Club is a transformation economy offering. The objective of Nike, the goal of Nike Run Club isn't just that, hey, I had a great time for an hour, right? And you're willing to pay for the app for that, right? You expect to be changed. You're signing on to this to become a different kind of person in some ways. So the obvious one is probably I want to maybe run faster. So the more I do this, my time goes down. Maybe it's to be healthier. Like I want to lose weight. But it's also things like I want to feel like I'm part of a community. Sometimes people don't even say that to themselves consciously, but they feel it, you know, and they want to be, why Nike and not some other version? Well, because Nike's got a brand around it. I want to feel like, you know, I'm listening to an athlete talking in my ear. Like I feel like I'm kind of one of them. Like he's talking to me, you know? So it's a kind of transformation of your own self-identity that happens through that offering, right? So, you know, that's kind of a long explanation to go through it, but I think it's useful to help people get fundamentally what this is about. Other examples are like CrossFit, right? So you're not just paying for a 1 hour membership to something. CrossFit is like a community for people. Like it's almost cultish, right? Or, you know, so they want to change their body. They want to change their image. They want to change their self-identity. They want all those things. That's what CrossFit is about. Now, not all of them are health like that. You know, they don't have to be just like changing your body. I think that's the easiest one to kind of keep in mind. But think about other apps like Mindspace. There's apps like, Headspace. I meant not Mindspace. Headspace, it's a meditation app. So you pay for that and you have, you know, 20-minute meditation every day. You're not just paying for that feel-good 20 minutes. You want to be a different kind of person by going through that process. You want to be more aware. You want to be more attentive to what's happening in your environment. You want to be more, maybe even have less stress in your life, right? So that framework is what I apply to urban design.
Love it.
Is thinking about what does it mean to have not just a service, like, yeah, I can create the drawing, I can be a service and you pay me for my time and I give you drawings. Now you have a physical thing, that's great. That all these things are still there. Like in Nike Run Club, they're still selling shoes, you know, that's still part of it, but it's just not enough. It goes to the next level, right? So with the drawing, yeah, I'll give you the drawings, but there's also experiences as part of it. The public meeting experience, the focus group, the prototyping sessions on the street, those are all experiences that have value to them. Now, the person attending, the public meeting person, may not be the one paying me $5 to come into that experience at the time, although that's a way to think about these experience economy questions is, are people willing to pay to come into that experience with you, right? But in this case, it's just down the line. Like someone got a grant or someone paid me to create this experience for their constituents, right? And that's how they justify the payment. But now take it to the next level of transformation. What is the transformation opportunity in this work, right? Like how do we change people in the way that they want to be changed through this activity, right? I think about the hours that people spend attending a public meeting over and over and over again. You know, let's say it's a 1 hour meeting or a 2 hour public meeting. It happens usually at least 3 times over the course of a project, right? So let's say you have 50 people in that meeting, which is probably a good public meeting, good turnout. So let's say 50 people, 2 hours for each times 6. So that's 6 hours times 50 people. Let's give them minimum wage. You know, that's a lot of money. Let's just say, let's think about it financially. That's a lot of value just on a very crass, basic level that we'll look at, that people are willing to put into this system. What are they getting back? You know, in one way, the feeling that I've contributed to my community. So that's something that's good, but is it enough? Can we do more? You know, so I think we can do more. I think when we do these projects, we can provide more value to people in the form of, maybe it's education, maybe it's helping people understand better what an urban designer does, like your question you just had.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is someone that's interested in doing a career move or a professional change. Can we create an opportunity for that to happen through this experience? Are there specific skills that people want in terms of public engagement? Maybe they want to be an urban designer, but I want to be a better community organizer. Can we embed that training into this process? You know, there's already stuff that we're doing and talking to the steering committee. It sometimes doesn't require that much more effort to have a significantly higher return, right? It could be exposing youth, doing a better job at getting youth at the public meeting to begin with. You need to do that anyway, but can we expose them to training or opportunities that they wouldn't have already? Can we build a stronger sense of place attachment in people during this process? Can they build a fondness or a love of where they live through this work? And we can actually track that stuff. You know, these are things that seem a little soft, you know, kind of like squishy, but there are ways that you can actually track this. And I love those kind of problems, you know. So like, I love the goal, first of all, just even setting that the audacity to kind of have that goal that we can do more in these meetings and provide value to people and transform them for the better in a way that they want, but also that we can track some of these things. We can measure and then do better next time and do better next time. And then maybe the result is that we have a much more informed, skilled, and capable community, so that when the next project comes around, they're better. You know, but why keep people in the same capacity every time a new project comes in? You know, are they actually getting better? How do we know? Like, are they even more skilled next time? Do they have better questions to ask of the design team next time when they come and ask and bring a project? Is it the same people that are coming? Are we getting more people coming or not? You know, I want to contribute, I guess, to the profession that way. You know, is by transforming people for the better, and then making the profession better. And then those tools that you talked about, like AR, VR, those are all in the service of that objective, right? So that's kind of like in response to that main goal, right? So for example, like VR, virtual reality, right now it's not as widely used, mostly because of hardware issues. Like, for one, the cost is pretty high. So like, you know, not everybody, I don't know if you have a VR headset at home, not a lot of people do, but increasingly kids are getting them, you know, like through PlayStation or just like gaming consoles, they're using VR. But I think the idea is that by 2022, probably like the second quarter of 2022, it's going to become much more common. The cost has gone down a lot. The quality is incredible already for consumer level. But why I'm excited about it is because it's so immersive. It sort of like hacks your senses in a way that nothing else that I've seen does. You know, for example, I have a little bit of like a concern with heights, you know, so I still like roller coasters and all that. So when I'm in a VR headset that does that, there's a certain game where you go up 30 stories in a building and like walk out on a plank. I know that I'm in a room with a stupid headset on my face,
right,
and there's nothing to worry about, like nothing will happen. But when I'm in that headset and I see and hear that 30-story height and that ground below me, I have a hard time walking out on that plank. You know, it like hacks my common sense, you know, like my awareness, right? So that's a kind of fun, weird example, but that can be used for really powerful things, like treating people that have PTSD, treating people that have gone through trauma, treating people that maybe can't afford to see a therapist every week, treating people that, well, maybe it's just education or skills learning. for students that have a hard time paying attention in a classroom where there's all kinds of distractions, when you're in that immersive environment, it's easier to stay focused on that environment. The sound, everything is tuned to maximize your ability to pay attention to whatever it is that you're trying to learn, right? So I don't think the vision is that we're going to have people in the future wearing these headsets 20 hours of the day and everybody's like in this mindless zombie world. I think just like anything else, you can have concentrated times of use of this tool, and then it enhances your life the rest of the time. You know, it makes you a better person the rest of the time. Like when I'm meditating for 20 minutes a day, that's my goal. Is not the ideal. If you meditate, is to be in meditation 20 hours a day, you know, and just be mindless zombie to everybody else, right? No, you do that for like 20 minutes or a certain period of time, and it's very effective at making me a better person in my other interactions in life, right? So it's just another thing to bring in. That's the way I think of it. And that's why, you know, with VR, I think that's a powerful tool with public engagement, with transforming people for the better, for them to customize their goals and objectives, what they want to learn, what they want to achieve. And frankly, now during this quarantine time, it makes these tools even more kind of attractive, and the value is even more visible, right? Because we can have these interactions beyond even this right now with this video environment. Imagine if we were more photorealistic, you know, avatar. We're walking down. You could pick, hey, dude, where do you want to do this? I don't know. Let's do it in Paris. All right, cool. Let's walk down the street in Paris and talk. That'd be amazing, you know. Right. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to see in the future.
Oh, dope, man. I love this conversation, man. Where can we find you at?
7thhilldesign.com. That's the website. And then, you know, you can hit Twitter. It's David Jurca, David Jurca, and then 7th Hill on Instagram and Facebook. But yeah, I'd love to hear from people. So I appreciate this opportunity. You know, I love talking to you. I always get inspired by particularly what you're doing to stay connected with folks. I love that you're still talking to the kids that you're working with, checking up on them. You know, DeAngelis, what are you doing? Staying busy. But I love that you're always after it. That's great.
Thank you, man. Appreciate your time.